but he was not a swordsman. "By Jove," he called as we fought. "Edward Kenway, how can I not be impressed by the attention you've paid me?" I refused him the courtesy of a reply. I fought on relentlessly, confident not in my skill, for that would have been the arrogant Edward Kenway of old, but in a belief that I would emerge the victor. Which I did. And at last he fell to the deck with my blade embedded in him, pulling me into a crouch. He smiled, his fingers going to where the blade was stuck in his chest. "A merry life and a short one, as promised," he said. "How well I know myself." He smirked a little. His eyes bored into me. "And what of you, Edward? Have you found the peace you seek?" "I'm not aiming so high as that," I told him. "For what is peace but a confusion between two wars?" He looked surprised for a second, as though thinking me incapable of anything other than grunts and demands for gold or another tankard. How pleasing it was that in his final moments Bartholomew Roberts witnessed the change in me, knew that his death at my hands was not driven by greed, but by something nobler. "You're a stoic, then," he laughed. "Perhaps I was wrong about you. She might have had some use for you after all." "She?" I said, puzzled. "Of whom do you speak?" "Oh, she who lies in wait, entombed. I had hoped to find her, to see her again, to open the door of the temple and hear her speak my name once more. Aita. Mumbo-jumbo. More bloody mumbo-jumbo. Talk sense, man. I was born too soon, like so many others before." "Where's the device, Roberts?" I asked him, tired now, tired of his riddles, even at the end. From his clothes he pulled the skull, and offered it to me with fingers that shook. "Destroy this body, Edward," he said as I took it, and the last of life seeped from him. "The Templars, if they take me—" And he died. And it was not for him, nor for the peace of his soul, that I tossed his body overboard, consigning it to the depths, but so that the Templars would not have him. Whoever, whatever this sage had been, the safest place for his body was at the bottom of the sea. And now, Grand Master Torres, I'm coming for you. 64. Arriving in Havana a few days before, I'd found the city in a state of high alert. Torres, it appeared, had been warned of my imminent arrival, and was taking no chances. Soldiers patrolled the streets, citizens were being searched and forced to reveal their faces, and Torres himself had gone into hiding, accompanied, of course, by his trusty bodyguard, El Tiburon. I'd used the observatory skull. Under the watchful eye of the Assassin Bureau Chief, Rona Dinsmore, I took a vial of Torres's blood in one hand and the skull in the other. As she watched me work, I wondered how I might look to her. Like a madman? A magician? A man using ancient science? "Through the blood of the governor we can see through his eyes," I told her. She looked as intrigued as she did doubtful. And after all, I wasn't sure of it myself. I'd seen it work in the observatory, but in images conjured up in the chamber by Roberts. Here I was trying something new. I needn't have worried. The red of the blood in the vial seemed to bathe the inside of the skull, and its eye-holes burned scarlet as it began to glow and display images on its polished dome. We were looking through the eyes of Governor Laureano Torres, who was looking at— That's by the church," she said, amazed. Moments later I'd been in pursuit and followed Torres as far as his fort, where the trap had been sprung. At some point a decoy had taken Torres's place. It was he who fell beneath my blade, and there, waiting for me beneath the walls of the fort, implacable, silent as ever, was El Tiburon. You should have killed me when you had the chance, I thought. Because when on the last occasion he'd bested me, it was a different Edward Kenway he'd met in battle. Things had changed in the meantime. I had changed, and I had much to prove to him. So if he'd hoped to beat me as easily as he had before, he was disappointed. He came forward, feinting, then switching sides, but I anticipated the move, defended easily, hit him on the counter, and opened a nick on his cheek. There was no grunt of pain, not from El Tiburon. But in those cloudy eyes was just the merest hint, the tiniest glimmer, of something I hadn't seen the last time we'd fought. Fear. And that gave me a boost more than any shot of liquor, and once again I came forward with my blade flashing. He was forced onto the back foot, defending left and right, trying to find a weak spot in my attack, but failing. Where were his guards? He hadn't summoned them, believing this would be an easy kill. But how wrong he was, I thought, as I pressed forward, dodged to my left, and swiped backhanded with my blade, opening a gash in his tunic and a deep cut in his stomach that began gushing blood. It slowed him down. It weakened him. I allowed him to come forward, pleased to see his sword strokes becoming more wild and haphazard as I carried on harrying him. Small but bloody strikes, wearing him down. He was slow now, his pain making him careless. Again I was able to drive forward with my cutlass, slash upwards with my hidden blade, and twist it in his stomach. A mortal blow, surely. His clothes were ragged and blood-stained. Blood from his stomach wound splattered to the ground, and he staggered with pain and exhaustion, looking at me mutely but with all the agony of defeat in his eyes. Until at last I put him down and he lay losing precious lifeblood, slowly dying in the heartless Havana sun. I crouched, blade to his throat, ready to plunge it up beneath his chin into his brain. End it quickly. You humbled me once, and I took that hard lesson, and I bettered myself, I told him. Die knowing that for all our conflicts, you helped make a soldier out of a scoundrel. My blade made a moist squelching sound as I finished it. Leave this life for a lasting peace, down among the dead, I told his corpse, and left. 65. Desperate Torres had fled. With the last throw of the dice, he decided to seek out the observatory for himself. I took the jackdaw in pursuit, my heart sinking as with each passing hour there was no sighting of Torres, and with each passing hour we grew closer to Tulum. Would he find it? Did he already know where it was? Had he found another poor soul to torture? An assassin? And then we came round the coast of Tulum, and there was Torres's galleon at anchor, smaller consorts bobbling by her sides. We saw the glint of spyglasses, and I ordered hard port. Moments later, black squares appeared in the hull of the Spanish galleon, and the sun shone dully off her gun barrels, before there was a thud and a puff of fire, and smoke and balls were smacking into us, and into the water around us. The battle would continue, but it would have to continue without its captain, and also, as she insisted on coming with me, its quartermaster. Together, Anne and I dived off the gunwale into bright blue water, and swam for shore, and then began the trek up the path to the observatory. It wasn't long before we came upon the first corpses. Just as the men on the galleon were fighting for their lives against the onslaught of the jackdaw, so the men with Torres had been doing the same. They had been ambushed by the natives, the observatory guardians, and from up ahead we could hear the sounds of more conflict. Desperate shouts, as the men at the rear of the column tried in vain to frighten off the natives. This land is under the protection of King Philip. Tell your men to disperse or die. But it was they who would die. As we passed through the undergrowth a short distance away from them, I saw their uncomprehending faces go from the monolithic edifice of the observatory, where had that come from, to scanning the long grass around them. They would die like that, terrified and uncomprehending. At the entrance to the observatory were more bodies, but the door was open, and some men had clearly made it inside. Anne bade me go in. She would stand guard. And so for a second time I entered that strange and sacred place, that huge temple. As I stepped inside, I remembered the last time, when Roberts had murdered his men rather than let them be unbalanced by what they saw inside. Sure enough, just as I crept into the vast entrance chamber, terrified Spanish soldiers were fleeing, screaming, their eyes somehow blank, as though whatever life in them had already been extinguished, as though they were corpses running. They ignored me and I let them go. Good. They'd distract the observatory guardians on the outside. And I pressed onwards, climbing stone steps, passing along the bridge chamber, more terrified soldiers, then towards the main control chamber. I was halfway there when the observatory began to hum. The same skull-crushing sound I'd heard on my first visit. I broke into a run, pushing past more frantic soldiers trying to make their escape, and dashing into the main chamber where stone crumbled from the walls as the observatory seemed to shake and vibrate with the droning noise. Torres stood at the raised control panel, trying to make himself heard above the din, calling to guards who were either no longer there or trying to make their escape, trying to negotiate the stone that fell around us. "Search the area! Find a way to stop this madness!" he screamed with his hands over his ears. He turned and with a lurch saw me. "He's here! Kill him!" he shouted, pointing. Spittle flew. In his eyes was something I'd never have believed him capable of. Panic. "Kill him!" Just two of his brave but foolhardy men were up to the challenge, and as the chamber shook, seemingly working itself loose around us, I made short work of them, until the only men left were Torres and I. And now the Templar Grand Master cast his eye around the chamber, his gaze travelling from the dead bodies of his men back to me. The panic had gone now. Back was the Torres I remembered, and in his face was not defeat, nor fear, nor even sadness at his imminent death. There was fervour. "We could have worked together, Edward," he appealed with his hands outstretched. "We could have taken power for ourselves and brought these miserable empires to their knees." He shook his head as if frustrated with me, as though I was an errant son. And no, sorry mate, but I'm an errant son no longer. "There is so much potential in you, Edward," he insisted. "So much you have not yet accomplished. I could show you things, mysteries beyond anything you could imagine." No. He and his kind had done nothing for me save to seek the curtailment of my freedom and take the lives of my friends. Starting with the night in Bristol when a torch was flung in a farmyard, his kind had brought me nothing but misery. I drove the blade in, and he grunted with pain as his mouth filled with blood that spilled over his lips. "Does my murder fulfill you?" he asked, weakly. No, it didn't. "I'm only seeing a job done, Torres, as you would have done with me." "As we have done, I think," he managed. "You have no family anymore, no friends, no future. Your losses are far greater than ours." "That may be, but killing you right to far greater wrong than I ever did." "You honestly believe that?" "You would see all of mankind corralled into a neatly furnished prison, safe and sober, yet dull beyond reason and sapped of all spirit, So with everything I've seen and learnt in these last years, I do believe it. You wear your convictions well, he said. They suit you. It was as though I'd been in a trance. The noise of the observatory, the rattle of stone falling around me, the screams of the fleeing troops, all of it had faded into the background as I spoke to Torres, and I only became aware of it again when the last breath died on his lips, and his head lolled on the stone. There was the noise of a distant battle, soldiers being ruthlessly dispatched, before Anne, Adewale, and Artabai burst into the chamber. Their swords were drawn and streaked with blood. Their pistols smoked. Torres awakened the observatory something fierce, I said to Artabai. Are we safe? With the device returned, I believe so, he replied, indicating the skull. Anne was looking around herself, open-mouthed. Even part destroyed in the wake of the rockfall, the chamber was still a sight to see. What do you call this place? She said, awestruck. Captain Kenway's folly, said Adewale, shooting me a smile. We will seal this place and discard the key, announced Artabai. Until another sage appears, this door will remain locked. There were vials when I came here last, I told him. Filled with the blood of ancient men, Robert said. But they're gone now. Then it's up to us to recover them, said Artabai with a sigh. Before the Templars catch wind of this. You could join us in that cause. I could. But only after I fix what I mangled back home. The old assassin nodded, and then, as though reminded of it, he removed a letter from his robes that he handed to me. It arrived last week. They left me as I read it. And I think you know the news it contained, don't you, my sweet? 66. October 1722. We had good reason to celebrate. So we did. However, with my new knowledge had come a decreased interest in inebriation, so I left the exuberance in the hands of the Jackdaw crew, who built fires and roasted hogs and danced and sang until they had no energy left. Then they simply collapsed and slept where they had stood, and then pulled themselves to their feet, grabbed the nearest flask of liquor, and began again. Me, I sat on the terrace of my homestead with Adewale and Artabai. Gentlemen, how do you find it here? I asked them. I'd offered it, my home, as their base. It will work well for us, said Artabai, but our long-term goal must be to scatter our operations, to live and work among the people we protect, just as Altair ibn Lahad once counseled. Well, until that time, it's yours as you see fit. Edward. I had already stood to find Anne, but turned to Adewale. Yes? Captain Woodes Rogers survived his wounds, he told me. I cursed, remembering the interruption. He has since returned to England, shamed and in great debt, but no less a threat. I will finish that job when I return, you have my word. He nodded, and we embraced before we parted, leaving me to join Anne. We sat in silence for a moment, smiling at the songs, until I said, I'll be sailing for London in the next few months. I'd be a hopeful man if you were beside me. She laughed. England is the wrong way round the globe for an Irishwoman. I nodded. Perhaps it was for the best. Will you stay with the assassins? I asked her. She shook her head. No, I haven't that kind of conviction in my heart. You? In time, when my mind is settled and my blood is cooled. Just then we heard a cry from afar, a ship sailing into the cove. We looked at one another, both of us knowing what the arrival of the ship meant. A new life for me, a new life for her. I loved her in my own way, and I think she loved me. But the time had come to part, and we did it with a kiss. "You're a good man, Edward," said Anne, her eyes shining as I stood. "And if you learn to keep settled to one place for more than a week, you'll make a fine father too." I left her and headed down to the beach to where a large ship was coming into dock. The gangplank was lowered, and the captain appeared, holding the hand of a little girl. A beautiful little girl, who shone brighter than hope, just 9 years old. And I thought you looked the spitting image of your mother. 67. A little vision you were. Jennifer Kenway, a daughter I never even knew I had. Embarking on a voyage which went against your grandfather's wishes but had your grandmother's blessing, you'd sailed to find me in order to give me the news. My beloved was dead. Did you wonder why I didn't cry, I wonder, as we stood on the dock at Inagua? So did I, Jenny. So did I. And on that voyage home I got to know you. And yet there were still things I had to keep from you, because I still had much I needed to do. Before, I talked about having loose ends to tie, business to take care of. Well, there were still loose ends to tie, still business to settle. I took a skeleton crew to Bristol, a few of my most trusted men. We sailed the Atlantic, a hard, rough crossing, made bearable by a stay in the Azores, then continued our journey to the British Isles and to Bristol. To home. To a place I hadn't visited for nigh on a decade. A place I'd been warned against ever returning to. As we came into the Bristol Channel, the black flag of the Jackdaw was brought down, folded up and placed carefully in a chest in my cabin. In its place we raised the red ensign. It would be enough to allow us to land at least, and once the port-marshals had worked out the Jackdaw was not a naval vessel, I'd be ashore and the ship anchored offshore. And then I saw it for the first time in so long, the Bristol dock, and I caught my breath. I'd loved Kingston, Havana, and above all Nassau. But despite everything that had happened, or maybe because of it, this was still my home. Heads turned in my direction as I strode along the harbour, a figure of mystery, dressed not like a pirate but something else. Perhaps some of the older ones remembered me, merchants I'd done business with as a sheep farmer, men I'd drunk with in the taverns when I'd boasted of going off to sea, and tongues would wag, and news would travel far. How far, I wondered? To Matthew Haig and Wilson? To Emmett Scott? Would they know that Edward Kenway was back, stronger and more powerful than before, and that he had scores to settle? I found a boarding house in town, and there rested the night. The next morning I bartered for a horse and saddle, and set off for Hatherton, riding until I reached my father's old farmhouse. Why I went there I'm not quite sure. I think I just wanted to see it. And so for long moments that's what I did. I stood by the gate in the shade of a tree, and contemplated my old home. It had been rebuilt, of course, and was only partly recognisable as the house in which I'd grown up. The one thing that had remained the same was the outhouse. The outhouse where my marriage to Caroline had begun. The outhouse in which you were conceived, Jennifer. I left, then halfway between Hatherton and Bristol, a road I knew so well, I stopped at a place I also knew well. The old Shillelagh. I tethered my horse outside, made sure she had water, then stepped in to find it almost exactly as I remembered. The low ceilings, the darkness that seemed to seep from the walls. The last time I was here I'd killed a man. My first man. Many more had fallen beneath my blade since. More to come. Behind the bar was a woman in her 50s, and she raised her tired head to look at me as I approached. "Hello, Mother," I said. "68. She took me to a side table away from the prying eyes of the few drinkers there. "So it's true, then?" she asked me. Her long hair had grey streaks in it. Her face was drawn and tired. It was only 10 years since I'd last seen her, but it was as though she had aged 20, 30, more. All my fault. "What's true, Mother?" I asked carefully. "You're a pirate." "No, Mother, I'm not a pirate. No longer. I've joined an order." "You're a monk?" She cast an eye over my robes. "No, Mother, I'm not a monk. Something else." She sighed, looking unimpressed. Over at the bar, the landlord was toweling tankards, watching us with a hawk eye. He begrudged her the time she spent away from the bar, but wasn't about to say anything. Not with the pirate Edward Kenway around. "And you decided to come back, did you?" she was saying. "I heard that you had. That you sailed into port yesterday, stepped off a glittering galleon like some kind of king. The big I am, Edward Kenway. That's what you always wanted, wasn't it?" "Mother." "That was what you were always going on about, wasn't it? Wanting to go off and make your fortune, make something of yourself, become a man of quality, wasn't it? That involved becoming a pirate, did it?" She sneered. I didn't think I'd ever seen my mother sneer before. "You were lucky they didn't hang you." "They still might if they catch me." "It's not like that anymore. I've come to make things right." She pulled a face like she'd tasted something nasty, another expression I'd never seen before. "Oh, yes, and how'd you plan to do that?" I waved a hand. "Not have you working here for a start." "I'll work wherever I like, young man," she scoffed. "You needn't think you're paying me off with stolen gold. Gold that belonged to other folks before they were forced to hand it to you at the point of your sword, eh? Is that it?" "It's not like that, Ma," I whispered, feeling young all of a sudden. "Not like the pirate Edward Kenway at all. This wasn't how I'd imagined it would be. Tears, embraces, apologies, promises. Not like this." I leaned forward. "I don't want it to be like this, Ma," I said quietly. She smirked. "That was always your trouble, wasn't it, Edward? Never happy with what you got?" "No," I began, exasperated. "I know what you mean. You mean you made a mess of things and then you left us to clear up your mess. And now you've got some finery about you and a bit of money. You think you can come back and pay me off. You're no better than Haig and Scott and their cronies. No, it's not like that. I heard you arrived with a little girl in tow. Your daughter?" "Yes." She pursed her lips and nodded, a little sympathy creeping into her eyes. "It was her who told you about Caroline, was it?" My fists clenched. She did. "She told you that Caroline was sick with the pox, and that her father refused her medicine, and that she ended up wasting away at that house on Hawkins Lane? She told you that, did she?" "She told me that, Ma, yes." She scratched at her head and looked away. I loved that girl. Caroline. Really loved her. Like a daughter she was to me until she went away. She shot me a reproachful look. That was your fault. I went to the funeral, just to pay my respects, just to stand at the gate. But Scott was there and all his cronies, Matthew Haig and that Wilson fella. They ran me off the place, said I wasn't welcome. They'll pay for that, Ma, I said through clenched teeth. They'll pay for what they've done. She looked quickly at me. Oh, yes. How are they going to pay then, Edward? Tell me that. You're going to kill them, are you? With your sword? Your pistols? Word is they've gone into hiding, the men you seek. Ma, how many men have died at your hand, eh? She asked. I looked at her. The answer, of course, was countless. She was shaking, I noticed, with fury. You think that makes you a man, don't you? She said. And I knew her words were about to hurt more than any blade. But do you know how many men your father killed, Edward? None. Not one. And he was twice the man you are. I winced. Don't be like this. I know I could have done things differently. I wish I'd done things differently. But I'm back now. Back to sort out the mess I made. She was shaking her head. No, you don't understand, Edward. There is no mess anymore. The mess needed sorting out when you left. The mess needed sorting out when your father and I cleared up what remained of our home and tried to start again. It put years on him, Edward. Years. The mess needed sorting out when nobody would trade with us. Not a letter from you, not a word. Your daughter was born, your father died, and not a peep from the great explorer. You don't understand. They threatened me. They threatened you. They said if I ever returned, they'd hurt you. She pointed. You did more hurting than they ever could, my son. And now you're here to stir things up again, are you? Things have got to be put right. She stood. Not in my name, they don't. I'll have nothing to do with you. She raised her voice to address everybody in the tavern. Only a few would hear her, but word would soon spread. You hear that? She said loudly. I disown him. The great and famous pirate Edward Kenway. He's nothing to do with me. Hands flat on a tabletop, she leaned forward and hissed, Now get out, no son of mine. Get out before I tell the soldiers where the pirate Edward Kenway is to be found. I left, and when on the journey back to my boarding house in Bristol I realised that my cheeks were wet. I allowed myself to cry. Grateful for one thing. Grateful that there was nobody around to see my tears or hear my wails of grief. 69. So, they'd gone to ground, the guilty men. And yes, there had been others there that night, the Cobleys among them. But I had no desire to account for them all, little taste for taking the lives of men given orders. The men I wanted gave those orders. Haig, Scott, and of course the man who left the insignia of the Templars on my face all those years ago. Wilson. Men who hid from me, whose guilt was confirmed by the fact that they were hiding from me. Good. Let them hide. Let them shake with fear. They knew I was coming after them. And I was coming after them. Tonight, all being well, Scott, Wilson and Haig would be dead. But they knew I was coming, so my investigations would have to be conducted a little more discreetly. When I left my boarding-house the next morning, I did so knowing I was beneath the gaze of Templar spies. I ducked into a tavern I knew of old, better than my pursuers, no doubt, and thanked my lucky stars it still had the same rear privy it always had. By the back door I held my breath against the stink, quickly stripped off my robes and changed into clothes I'd brought with me from the jackdaw, clothes I'd last worn many, many moons ago. My long buttoned-up waistcoat, knee breeches, white stockings, and a battered brown tricorn. And thus attired, I left the tavern, emerging on a different street, a different person. Just another merchant on his way to market. I found her there, exactly where I'd expected to, and jogged the basket on her arm so she'd know I was behind her, whispering, "I got your message." "Good," said Rose, without turning her head, bending to inspect some flowers. With a quick look left and right, she whipped out a headscarf and tied it over her head. "Follow me." A moment later, Rose and I loitered near some dilapidated stables in a deserted corner of the market. I glanced at the structure, then back again with a jolt of recognition. I'd stabled my own horse here many years ago. It had been new then and convenient for the market, but the sprawl of stalls had shifted over the intervening years. Its entrances had moved, and the stables had fallen into disuse, fit only for loitering near, for conducting clandestine meetings, as we did now. "You've met young Jennifer, have you?" she said. She shifted the basket on her arm. She'd been a young girl when I'd first encountered her at the old Shillelagh. 10 years later she was still young, but missing was that spark, that rebellious streak that had made her run away in the first place. A decade of drudgery had done that to her. And yet, like the glowing sparks of a dying fire, there was some of her old nature left, because she'd sent me a letter requesting to meet me, and here she was, with things to tell me. Among them, I hoped, the whereabouts of her master and his friends. "I have," I told her. "I've met my daughter. She's safe on my ship." "She has your eyes." I nodded. "She has her mother's beauty." "She's a beautiful girl. We were all very fond of her." "But willful." Rose smiled. "Oh, yes. She was determined that she should see you when Mistress Caroline passed away last year." "I'm surprised Emmett allowed it." Rose chortled dryly. "He didn't, sir. It was the mistress of the house who organised it. Her and Miss Jennifer cooked it up between them. The first his nibs knew of it was when he woke up to find Miss Jennifer gone. He wasn't happy. He wasn't happy at all, sir." "Meetings, were there?" She looked at me. "You could say that, sir, yes." "Who came to see him, Rose?" "Master Haig." "And Wilson?" She nodded her head. "All the conspirators. And where are they now?" "I don't rightly know, sir," she said. I sighed. "Then why invite me here if you've nothing to tell me?" She turned her face to me. "I mean, I don't know where they're hiding, sir, but I do know where Mr. Scott plans to be tonight, for I've been asked to take him some fresh clothes to his offices." "The warehouse?" "Yes, sir. He has business items to collect as well, sir. He plans to be there personally. I've been asked to go there when night has fallen." I looked at her long and hard. "Why, Rose?" I said. "Why are you helping me like this?" She glanced this way and that. "Because you once helped save me from a fate worse than death. Because Mistress Caroline loved you. And because—" "What?" "Because that man, he watched her die. He wouldn't let her get the medicine she needed, not her or Mrs. Scott, the both of them ill. Mrs. Scott recovered, but Mrs. Kenway never did." It startled me to hear Caroline called Mrs. Kenway. It had been so long since she'd been referred to that way. Why did he deny them the medicine? Pride, sir. It was him who caught the smallpox first, but he recovered. He thought Mrs. Scott and Mrs. Kenway should be able to as well. But she began to get such terrible blisters all over her face, sir. Oh, sir, you've never seen anything like it. I held up a hand, not wanting to hear more, wanting to preserve the image I had of Caroline. There was an epidemic in London, and we think Mr. Scott picked it up there. Even the royal family were in fear of it. You didn't get it? She looked at me guiltily. The staff were inoculated, sir. Head butler saw to it. Swore us to silence. I sighed. Good for him. He may have saved you a great deal of suffering. Sir. I looked at her. Tonight, then? Tonight, sir. Yes. "70. And it had to be tonight. Are you Edward Kenway? She'd said to me. My landlady. Edith was her name. She'd knocked on the door to my room and stood on the threshold, unwilling to venture further. Her face was bloodless, her voice shook, and her fingers worried at the hem of her pinafore. Edward Kenway? I smiled. Now why would you say a thing like that, Edith? She cleared her throat. They say that a man arrived on a boat. A man dressed much like you are now, sir. And that the man is Edward Kenway, who once called Bristol his home. The colour had come back into her cheeks now, and she reddened, continuing. And there are others who say that Edward Kenway has returned home to settle scores, and that those against whom he bears his grudge have gone into hiding, but being powerful men have called resources against you. I mean, him. I see, I said carefully. And what manner of resources might these be? A troop of soldiers headed for Bristol, sir, expected to arrive this very evening. I see. And no doubt heading straight for wherever this Edward Kenway has his lodgings, whereupon Edward Kenway would be forced to defend himself, and there would surely be a bloody battle, with many lives lost and much damage caused. She swallowed. Yes, sir. Well, you can rest assured, Edith, that no such unpleasantness will occur here tonight, for I'm sure Edward Kenway will make certain of it. And know this of him, Edith. It's true he was a pirate once, and that he did his fair share of despicable things, but he's chosen a different path now. He knows that to see differently we must think differently, and he has changed his thinking. She looked at me blankly. Very good, sir. And now I shall take my leave, I told her, doubtless never to return. Very good, sir. On the bed was a bundle of my things that I picked up and slung over one shoulder. Then I thought better of it, and instead picked out what I needed, the skull and a small pouch of coins that I opened, pressing gold into Edith's hand. Oh, sir, that's more than generous. You've been very kind, Edith, I said. She stood to one side. There's a back door, sir, she said. I went via a tavern where I knew to find the jackdaw's coxswain, awaiting my orders. Birtwistle? Yes, sir. Bring the jackdaw to the harbour tonight. We're leaving. Yes, sir. And then I went on to the warehouse district, using the back streets and rooftops. I stayed low and in the shadows. And I thought, oh, Mary, if you could only see me now. Scott's warehouse was one of many near the ports, the masts of berthed ships visible over the roofs. Most of the warehouses were deserted, shut up for the night. Only his had signs of life. Flaming cressets that painted a small loading area a shade of flickering orange, empty carts nearby, and standing by the closed door a pair of guards. Not soldiers, at least. Had they arrived in the city yet? But local Scarfaces, slapping clubs into their palms, who probably thought this was an easy job, who were probably looking forward to a taste of ale later. I stayed where I was, a shadow in the darkness, watching the door. Was he already in there? I was still debating when to make my move when Rose arrived. She wore the same headscarf as earlier, and her basket bulged with clothes for her hated lord and master, Emmett Scott. The two strong arms at the door shared a lascivious look as they stepped forward to intercept her. Sticking to the side of the adjacent warehouse, I crept within earshot. "Is Mr. Scott here?" she asked. "Ah," said one of the Scarfaces in a heavy West Country accent, grinning. "Well, that all depends on who's asking, don't it, my dear?" "I've clothes for him." "You'd be the maid, would you?" "That's right." "Well, he's here, so you'd better go in." I was close enough to see her roll her eyes as they stepped aside and let her in. Right. So Scott was in there. In the dark, I tested the action of my blade. Mustn't be too hasty, I thought. Mustn't kill him. Scott had some talking to do before he died. I moved round the edge of the warehouse wall, and the two strong arms were just a few feet away from me now. It was just a question of waiting for the right moment to From inside came a scream. Rose. And it was no longer a question of waiting for the right time. It was a time for action. I'd sprung from the dark, covered the distance between myself and the sentries, engaged the blade, and slashed the throat of the first one, before Rose's scream had even died down. The second one cursed and swung his club, but I caught his flailing arm, jammed him up against the warehouse wall, and finished him with a blade in his back. He slid down the wall even as I crouched at the wicket door of the warehouse, raised a hand, and pushed it open. A musket ball zinged over my head as I rolled into the entranceway, getting a quick impression of a warehouse stacked with tea chests, a gantry with offices on it at one end. There were 3 figures on the gantry, one of them standing on the rail as though about to jump the 20 feet or so to the ground. I came to rest behind a stack of crates, peeked round the edge, and pulled back as another ball smacked into the wood nearby, showering me with wood chips. But my quick look was enough to confirm that, yes, there were 3 people on the gantry above me. There was Wilson, who stood with a pistol aimed at my hiding place. To one side of him was Emmett Scott, sweating as with trembling, frantic fingers he tried to reload another pistol to hand to Wilson. And above them was Rose, who wobbled unsteadily on the railing, terrified. Her mouth bled, the punishment for her warning scream, no doubt. Her hands had been tied, and she wore a noose round her neck. All that stopped her from dropping from her makeshift gallows was Wilson, who held her with his other hand. If he let go, she fell. "Hold it there, Kenway," called Wilson as the dust settled, "or you'll have the death of the maid on your hands." They'd disarm me. They'd kill me, then hang Rose for her treachery. Not if I have anything to do with it. From my gun belt I pulled a pistol and checked the ball and powder. "It was you there that night, wasn't it, Wilson? The leader. You were the one in the hood." I had to know. I had to be sure. Aye, it was. And if it had been left up to me, you would all have died that night. I almost smiled. You missed your chance. Up on the rail, Rose whimpered but checked herself. "Now throw out the hidden blade, Kenway. I can't hold her forever," warned Wilson. "And what about you, Emmett?" I called. "Were you there?" "I was not," he retorted, flustered and frightened. "You would have celebrated my death, though. You have been a thorn in my side, Kenway. Your pride has been your undoing, Scott. Your pride has been the undoing of us all. You know nothing. I know that you allowed my beloved to die. I loved her too. No kind of love that I recognize, Scott. You wouldn't understand. I understand that your ambition and thirst for power have led to the deaths of many people. I understand that now you will pay." From inside my robes I took a throwing knife and weighed it in my palm. Bit different to using trees for target practice. I stood and inched towards the edge of the stack, taking deep, slow breaths. Ready? Ready. "Come on, Kenway," called Wilson. "We don't have all I rolled out from my cover and darted forward and found my aim, firing my pistol and using the throwing knife at the same time. Both met their targets. Emmett Scott span away with a hole in his forehead, his pistol dropping uselessly to the planks of the gantry, while Wilson had returned fire before my knife found his shoulder. Yelling in pain, he staggered back and fell against the office wall with the blade embedded, fountaining blood, as he scrabbled in vain for the second pistol. His ball had found its mark. I felt it thud into my shoulder, but couldn't let it take me down. Couldn't even let it slow me down, because Wilson had let go of Rose, and Rose was falling, her mouth wide in a scream I didn't hear above the echoes of the gunshots and the rushing of pain in my head. She fell, and the rope unspooled behind her, and I had an image of failure where the rope tautened and her body jerked and her neck snapped. No. I hit a crate at full pelt, stepped up in a run and launched myself off. I twisted, engaged my blade, and with a yell of effort sliced the rope, caught Rose round the waist, and the pair of us slammed heavily and painfully to the stone floor of the warehouse. But alive. From above I heard Wilson cursing. I snatched a second pistol from my belt and squinted through the gaps in the boards above me, seeing the light flicker and squeezing off a shot. There came another scream from the gantry, then a crash as he made his way into the offices. I dragged myself to my feet. The pain from my wound was intense, and the older wound in my flank flared up too, making me limp as I made it to the steps of the gantry and climbed in pursuit of Wilson. I charged through the office where I found an open back door leading to steps, and at the top I caught my breath and leaned on the rail for support as I peered over the warehouses. No sign. Just the distant clattering of ships at rest and the squawk of gulls. I concentrated, using the sense, and I heard something. But not Wilson. What I heard was the sound of marching feet as they approached the port area. They were coming. The soldiers were coming. I cursed and limped back inside to check on Rose. She would be okay. I ran back to follow a trail of blood left by Wilson. 71. You were safe in my cabin. Asleep, so I'm told. So you missed what happened next. And for that I'm thankful. I reached the harbour to find that Wilson had died on the way. His body lay at the bottom of the steps. He'd been going to a ship I recognised, one that when I'd last seen it was called the Caroline, but had since been renamed in honour of the woman Matthew Haig had gone on to marry. It was called the Charlotte. Haig was in there, a man awaiting death, though he didn't know it yet. I could see poorly defined figures in the grey haze of the evening moving across the stern gunwale. Guards. But it didn't matter. Nothing was going to stop me getting on board that ship. If the guards had seen or heard Wilson fall, they probably thought he was drunk. And if they saw me squatting by his body, then they probably thought I was a drunk too. They didn't care. Not yet. I counted 4 of them as I raced along the harbour wall until I reached where the Jackdaw had not long been docked. In between the 2 ships was another smaller sailing boat, held by a line that I unwound and let go, giving the stern of the craft a shove to set it off before dashing back to my ship. "Hanley," I said, addressing the quartermaster. "Yes, sir." "Prepare the guns." He'd been sitting with his feet up on the navigation table, but dragged them off. "What? Why, sir?" "And bloody hell, sir, what's up with you?" "Musket ball in the shoulder." "Did you get the men you wanted?" "2 of them." "I'll fetch the dock." "Leave it, Hanley," I growled. "It can wait. Look, there's a vessel to our starboard, name of Charlotte. On it is the 3rd man I seek. Ready the starboard guns, and if my plans fail, blast her out of the water." I ran to the cabin door, then stopped, screwing up my face in pain as I turned to him. "And Hanley—" "Yes, sir?" He had stood, his face a picture of worry. "You'd better prepare the stern guns as well. And make sure the crew is armed. There are soldiers on the way." "Sir?" I gave him an apologetic look. "Just look sharp, Hanley. If all goes well, we'll be out of this in moments." He didn't look reassured. He looked even more worried. I gave him what I hoped was a confident smile, then swept a wedge from beneath the cabin door as I left. The sailing boat had begun its drift out to sea. I heard a shout from the deck of the Charlotte as they spotted it. The laughter. Fools. They saw the joke, not the danger. I leapt overboard, planting my feet on the stone of the harbour, then racing the few yards to the stern of the Charlotte. "It's Wilson!" I shouted in my best approximation of the dead enforcer as I clambered up the ladder. A face appeared over the gunwale to greet me, and I planted my fist in it, dragged him over the rail, and hurled him to the stone below. His screams alerted a second man who came running to what he assumed was the scene of an accident, until he saw me and the blade, which gleamed in the moonlight before I swept it backhanded across his throat. Ignoring the last 2 sentries, I ran up the deck towards the captain's cabin, peered through the window, and was treated to the sight of Matthew Haig, an older Matthew Haig, and a worried one by the looks of things, standing by a table. With him was his draftsman. With a glance to see the 2 sentries lumbering up the deck towards me, I dragged open the door of the cabin. "You," I said to the draftsman. Haig dropped a goblet he'd been holding. They both goggled at me. I risked another glance back at the sentries. I cursed, slammed the cabin door shut, wedged it, and turned to meet the 2 guards. They could have escaped, I told myself, as they died. It was their choice to fight me. To my port, the hatches of the Jackdaw's gun deck were opening, and the muzzles of guns appeared. Good lads. I saw men on deck brandishing muskets and swords. Somebody shouted, "You need a hand, Captain?" No, I didn't. I turned back to the cabin door, pulled the wedge free, and snatched open the door. "Right, last chance," I ordered the draftsman, who practically threw himself at me. "Archer!" wailed Haig, but neither of us was listening as I hauled Archer out of the cabin and jammed it shut behind him. Haig imprisoned now. "Get off the ship," I barked to Archer. who needed no further invitation, scrabbling for the stern. Now I could hear the marching feet of soldiers as they approached the harbour wall. "Tar!" I appealed to my crew on the other deck. "Barrels of tar, and be quick about it!" A barrel was tossed to me from the jackdaw, and I set upon it, opening it and spreading it by the door to the cabin. "Please!" I could hear Haig from inside. He was thumping on the wedged-shut door. "Please!" But I was deaf to him. The marching was closer now. Horse hooves, the rumble of cartwheels. I glanced at the harbour wall, expecting to see the tops of their bayonets, as I emptied a second barrel of tar on the deck. Would it be enough? It would have to do. And now I saw them. The muskets of the soldiers as they appeared, silhouetted along the top of the harbour wall. At the same time they saw me and pulled the muskets from their shoulders and took aim. By my side the crew of the jackdaw did the same, as I snatched up a torch and leapt to the ratlines, climbing to a point where I could let go of the torch, dive off the rigging, and escape the flames. If the muskets didn't get me first, that was. And then came the command. "Hold your fire!" 72. The order came from a carriage that had pulled up on the harbour, its door opening before it had even finished drawing to a halt. Out skipped two men, one dressed like a footman, who arranged the steps for the second man, a tall, lean gentleman who wore smart clothes. And now a third man appeared, a portly gentleman in a long white wig, frilled shirt, and fine satin jacket and breeches. A man who looked as though he'd enjoyed many a lunch in his time, and many a glass of port and brandy to go with those many lunches. The footman and the tall man gaped as they became aware of the many guns pointing in their direction. By accident or design, they placed themselves in the middle. The guns of the soldiers on one side, the carriage guns and muskets of the jackdaw on the other, and me on the rigging, ready to drop a flaming torch to the deck below. The portly gentleman moved his mouth as though exercising it in readiness to speak. He laced his hands across his chest, rocked back on his heels, and called up to me. "Do I have the pleasure of addressing Captain Edward Kenway?" "And who might you be?" I called back. That produced a shudder of amusement from the soldiers on the harbour wall. The portly man smiled. "You've been away a long time, Captain Kenway." I agreed I had. His lips smacked and rearranged themselves into a smile. "Then you are forgiven for not knowing who I am. I think, however, that you will know my name. It is Walpole. Sir Robert Walpole. I am the First Lord of the Treasury, Chancellor of the Exchequer, and Leader of the House of Commons." And I was just thinking what an impressive title that was, and how he must be one of the most powerful men in the land, when... Walpole? It couldn't be. But he was nodding. "Yes, indeed, Captain Kenway. Duncan Walpole, the man whose life and identity you took as your own, was my cousin." I felt myself tense even more. What game was he playing? And who was the tall man by his side? It struck me that he had a family resemblance to Matthew Haig. Was this his father, Sir Aubrey Haig? Walpole was waving a reassuring hand. "It is quite all right. Not only was my cousin involved in affairs I keep at a distance, but he was a treacherous man. A man blessed, I'm afraid, with few principles. A man prepared to sell the secrets of those who trusted him to the highest bidder. I was ashamed to see him bear the Walpole name. I think perhaps in many ways you have done my family a good turn." I see, I called. And that's why you're here, is it? To thank me for killing your cousin? Oh no, not at all. Then to what do I owe the pleasure of this visit? As you can see, I have other matters to attend to. The torch grumbled as I waved it for effect. From the wedged cabin of the Charlotte came a banging sound as Haig tried to get free. Otherwise there was a tense hush as the soldiers and the sailors peered at one another along the barrels of their weapons, both sets of men awaiting their orders. Well, Captain Kenway, it's exactly those matters that exercise us, I'm afraid, called Walpole. For I cannot allow you to continue on your present course of action. As a matter of fact, I'm going to have to ask you to toss the torch in the sea and come down from there right away. Or, alas, I shall have the men shoot you. I chortled. You shoot me, and my men return fire, Sir Robert. I fear even you yourself might get caught in the crossfire. Not to mention your friend, Sir Aubrey Haig, is it? It is indeed, sir, said the tall man, stepping forward. I come to plead clemency for my son. His son had been a disappointment to him, I could see. Let me see your fingers, I demanded. Haig raised his hands. A Templar ring glittered. My heart hardened. And you, Sir Robert? His hands remained laced across his stomach. You'll see no ring on me, Captain Kenway. Why does the idea tickle you? From what I've seen, the Templars enjoy rank and status. How am I to know that I'm not addressing their Grand Master? He smiled. Because no power is absolute, Captain Kenway, and my purpose here is not to act as ambassador for one side or indeed the other. My purpose here is to prevent an act of barbarism. I scoffed. Barbarism? It didn't seem to bother them when they were burning my parents' home. Where was Sir Robert Walpole then? Sipping port, perhaps, with his Templar friends, congratulating himself on abstaining from their schemes. He could afford to, of course. His wealth and power were already assured. From the cabin, Matthew Haig snivelled and whimpered. You have returned to these shores on a mission of vengeance, I take it, called Walpole. There are those with whom I have scores to settle, yes? Walpole nodded. Woodes Rogers being one of them. I gave a short, surprised laugh. Yes, he would be one of them. Would it make a difference if I told you that Rogers currently languishes in debtor's prison, that the wounds you inflicted on him have left his health in a terrible state of disrepair, that his order has disowned him, his hot temper, his continued slave trading? He is a broken man, Captain Kenway. I wonder if perhaps you might consider that matter settled. He was right. What more harm could my blade do to Rogers other than to put him out of his misery? He is not my immediate concern, I called. That honour belongs to the man in the cabin below. Walpole gave a sad smile. A silly, shallow boy, influenced by others. You must believe me when I tell you, Captain Kenway, that the principal malefactors in that particular episode are already dead by your hands. Rest assured that Matthew's current shame is punishment enough for his wrongdoing. I took a deep breath. I thought of my mother asking me how many I'd killed. I thought of Black Bart's cruelty. I thought of Mary Reed's spirit and Adewale's courage and Blackbeard's generosity. And I thought of you. Because Torres had been wrong when he said I had nobody. I did have somebody. I had you. You who shone with hope. Today I should like to make you an offer, Captain Kenway, continued Walpole. An offer I hope you will find favourable, that will finally draw a curtain across this whole sorry affair. He outlined his proposals. I listened, and when he was finished, I told him my answer, and dropped the torch. 73. Except, of course, I dropped it into the sea. Because he offered pardons for my men and I saw their faces turn expectantly to me, every one of them a wanted man with a chance of having his slate wiped clean. He offered us all, every man jack of us, a new life. And Walpole had offered much more besides. Property. The chance to make something of myself with business contacts in London. When I'd finally climbed down from the rigging, the soldiers had put down their muskets, and the crew of the Jackdaw relaxed. Then Matthew Haig had been released and run to his father and offered me tearful apologies, while Walpole took my arm and led me away, speaking of who I would be introduced to in London. The Stevenson Oakley family, a lawyer, an assistant by the name of Birch to help me in my new business dealings. My mercy would be handsomely rewarded, he assured me. In return, he would see to it that I became the man I had always wanted to be. A man of quality. Of course, I had since gained greater expectations of myself. But money, business, and a house in London would be a fine foundation on which to build a new and richer life. A fine foundation indeed. A place I could use to attend to my other business. My assassin business. Shall we go, my darling? Shall we set sail for London? This audiobook was recorded at Chatterbox Audio and produced and published by Penguin Books Limited. Recording copyright 2013.
Audible hopes you've enjoyed this programme.